What's real, South Florida? My name is Marlon Wong. I'm a local realtor here with Coldwell Banker, specifically the Pinecrest office. And today we will be interviewing our managing broker, Mr. Mario Goderich. Mario, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Marlon. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Just want to start off really quick with a little bit of background info of you yourself personally, and then kind of how you got into real estate and into the business.
Sure. I've been the broker for the Coldwell Banker Pinecrest office now for a couple of years. Prior to that, I was the managing broker for the Coldwell Banker Kendall office here in South Florida. And prior to that, I was a real estate agent for many, many years. Uh, Ended up being in the usually about top 15% in the country nationally for Coldwell Banker. Won numerous national awards for Coldwell Banker, and had used to close at one point 8 properties. I'd have I'd close 8 transactions every 8 days. So I'd close approximately 38 transactions a year. And if you're a real estate agent, you can really kind of appreciate how much work that would be. And I did that all by myself. How did I get into the real estate business? Well, I think I have to either credit or blame my wife for getting into the real estate business. In my previous occupation, I had a little bit of experience with private developers wanting to develop government-owned lands. And so I actually brokered a couple of deals on behalf of the government for commercial type properties. So my wife one day, who is an avid fan of a show called $1 Million Listing, thought that that would be a fantastic career path for me to venture into. And when she first mentioned it, I said, "Oh my gosh, I have no experience, no sales background, but I had a fantastic corporate background." So decided to get my real estate license and interviewed several different brokerages, and ultimately actually chose Coldwell Banker because I felt that they offered the most training and support that I would need as a new agent, because that to me is the most critical thing you're going to need when you're a brand new agent. And they did offer that and continue to offer that, and chose Coldwell Banker over all kinds of brokerages. And even when I became a successful realtor, stuck with Coldwell Banker because I felt that they offered the best value proposition for me. Got into it on the residential side. Eventually ventured a little bit into commercial when my clients needed some commercial help. So I did a little of both and was very, very happy. And eventually the leadership for Coldwell Banker appreciated my efforts and asked if I was interested in a leadership position, and I finally accepted. One of the things that I always loved to do as an agent before even becoming a broker was to mentor and coach new agents, because I felt that I always felt good about their success. If they were successful, I felt that I had succeeded in helping them in some way, shape, or form. I never felt threatened in this type of environment. And so that was kind of what led to the transition in terms of where I am today. And right now, my key role really in this office is to obviously recruit new agents with potential, and also to retain agents, basically through what we call our value proposition, which is essentially ensuring that we are continuing on that my agent's business is continuing on an uphill climb, and that's really what we try to focus on.
Gotcha. Wonderful. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit, can you tell me and the viewers at home a little bit about your background and your upbringing, and kind of what maybe things you learned, whether it was odd jobs or family instillments, that kind of helped you in real estate?
Yeah, I mean, I could go back almost to my very first job, which was washing dishes at a restaurant, which first job on the weekends. And what it taught me was basically what hard work was all about. It also taught me what I didn't want to do for a living when I grew up. My background basically post high school, post college was in government work. I also actually worked for a few years for an airline, a regional airline. But I think the most important lesson that I learned in all of those jobs was the fact that was to learn responsibility and to learn to be consistent. And I preach this all the time, even in my real estate model. being a real estate agent is very different from most other jobs and careers. When you're an employee of a company, you kind of come in, the employer tells you what they expect of
Mm-hmm.
you and what you're supposed to do every day, and then you do it. You know, when you're a real estate agent, it's a whole different environment. You're your own
Yep.
boss. And, I basically recommend, I can't mandate anything to a real estate agent. So it's really important that you as an agent be extremely self-directed. And uh, if there's anything I learned from my background, in my corporate background, my job related background before becoming a real estate agent, was to treat this career like a job. Basically every single day, actually every night before I would go to bed, I would have a to-do list written for what I anticipated doing the next day, and try to stick to that list as much as possible. And if I didn't get it done, I'd pass it on to the next
Mm-hmm.
day. And it was all about consistency. It was all about knowing what I should be doing that following day to keep me on a path to success. And really, that's to me a key in real estate. It's perseverance, it's consistency in terms of doing things over and over again. It's not hanging all of your eggs in one basket. It's trying different methods for getting business and seeing what's successful to you. I always preach to agents, if you were to start a new business, if you were to start a restaurant and, open up a restaurant, you wouldn't just do it on whatever days you feel like getting up.
Yeah.
You do it every single day. You might have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and seeing what's going on in the kitchen, prepping everything. And real estate's really in a sense like that too. And if you don't follow that model, then it just becomes that much more difficult and frankly more inconsistent. And the thing that I always strived in my real estate business was to make sure that I had a paycheck coming in every month,
Mm.
if I could, no matter the size. But it was always, that was my minimum
Something.
goal, something coming in every single month, and that's what I strive to do. That was always my goal.
Yeah, I think my family would appreciate that background, obviously coming from the restaurant business, my family, and then kind of
Yeah.
to everything to what you said. And you brought up a good point in regards to um, treating it like a job, especially when agents first come in. Do you have any specific tips? Because especially for those of us who maybe be coming from a W-2, aren't used to maybe necessarily working for themselves, what sort of systems did you find that worked for you or have worked, for some of your top agents, especially when they first started? Just the
Yeah, and I think
consistency.
that that's a real difficult transition. When you come from a W-2 environment to a 1099 independent contractor type environment. Frankly, I had the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started as an agent, came into the office, and obviously, I think the key thing, particularly for new agents, is to learn as much as you can about the business. So I did all the education, all the training, at the front end, try to do as much of it as possible. By the way, I soon learned that it never really ends. There's always education and
Mm-hmm.
training in this business, and that's fantastic. It's continuous education loop that you really need to go through all the time. But when it comes to kind of getting into that mindset of treating this like a business, and I'll give you a classic example. I mean, I go to a barber that cuts a lot of realtors' hair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he's always telling me stories. He goes, Mario, I talk to a lot of the agents, and some agents seem to be struggling. They're not doing as well. So I always start by asking some really basic questions. What's your day like? You know, how do you plan out your day? And the minute I hear, well, I get up at noon and I'm done by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that already tells me that that
Yeah.
agent doesn't have the right mindset in terms of this business. Because if you think you're going to be successful working 3 hours a day, you're just not going to do it. So when really for me, to-do list was critical, and it didn't matter. When I say it didn't matter, it mattered that I had something to do, that there was something on there. So that to-do list could consist of uh, farming techniques. It could consist of prospecting. Of course, once I started getting into business, it also consisted of taking care of my clients and
Mm-hmm.
following transactions. But at the front end, when you don't have all of that, I think the most important thing that you can do is, get the initial training, because there's nothing like having a realtor that doesn't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting that initial training is critical. I always tell agents that don't know what they're doing, who you're really doing a disservice to? Your client. And so, knowing as much as possible, using the resources that you have available, using your broker when you have questions, and the staff. when you have questions, so that because I think a lot of what makes an agent successful, frankly, is self-confidence. So, and that can be a hard thing when you're starting out new in the business, in this environment. Uh, when we talk about, I used to call it spinning plates. What three or
Mm-hmm.
four things would I do to get business? And a couple of them were kind of creative. Um, but I'll start off even with the basic things. Uh, Start to brand yourself. You know, get people to know who you are, and that's not always easy when you're starting off with a new
Mm-hmm.
career. Although now there's many more tools that are available to agents that weren't available when I first started in the business. I mean, you've got social media mechanisms that you can at least get out there. Um, I talked about farming, and I'm a big advocate of farming, at least from the perspective of getting your name out there and being consistent with that model. Um, you know, Getting your name out there over and over and over again in front of potential uh, clientele. I used to be very successful in looking at expired listings for sale by owners. Again, those are not always easy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I never met a for sale by owner that wanted to list a house with me the first time I met them. You know,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and it was more of a long-term kind of scheme where I would reach out to them, find out a little bit about how they marketed their own home. Many of them don't know how to really
Mm-hmm.
market their own home or understand the process. They think it's very simple. You just put a for sale sign out in front and off it goes. There's a lot more to it. They don't pre-screen potential buyers. They don't do a lot of things that good agents do to make their lives easier,
Mm.
really. Um, for sale by owners, expireds, canceled listings. I had a whole scope of that. Farming, as I mentioned before. Sphere of influence. I made it, again, it was on my to-do list. I made it a habit to try to have even just a cup of coffee if I had to with somebody that I knew that was on my phone list. One of the first things that they tell a realtor, and it's funny when you first start out, is they go, how many contacts do you have on your phone?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't realize how many
Yeah.
contacts they have on their phone until you really start going through the process and how many holes there are really in that whole contact list. So, one of the things that we try to advocate to newer agents is, look at your own contact list, try to fill in as many blanks as you can. And when you have blanks in your own contact list, for example, you might have a phone number, but you don't have an email. You might have an
Yeah.
email, you don't have a phone number. You may not have a complete name. You may not have, you may not know. It's a great excuse to reach out to somebody and say, hey, this is Mario with Coldwell Banker. I just started this new career. I'm just reaching out to you to say hi, to let you know that. And by the way, I see that I don't have your email. Would you mind giving it to me? And that's the kind of thing. So it's, strengthening your sphere of influence, doing the other things that I mentioned. Networking is another interesting tool for getting your name out. Uh, Heck, it's funny, but when I was a real estate agent, and I didn't do this prior to being a real estate agent, my old high school has reunions with some people in my class. They actually meet, believe it or not, every 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
And I hadn't participated in that prior to becoming a real estate agent. Well, when I became a real estate agent, I started participating. And, interestingly enough, I ultimately ended up having a lot of those individuals become my clients.
Awesome.
And so, that was another tool. I actually became a member of a not for profit organization that I'm still on their board of directors, believe it or not. And again, because of the network of people that I met through that not for profit, also assisted me in building up my clientele. So it's just looking at uh, different plates, if you will, of
Mm-hmm.
business that you can potentially pin on. I used to do open houses for new agents. I know right now we don't have as many open houses as we
Yeah.
used to in this environment post pandemic, but they're starting to come back. So, when I was a new agent, if I didn't have my own business, I made sure that I did my best to sit on somebody else's open house, again, for the purpose of trying to get buyers, trying to get clientele. Um, and so, there was always a little of that every single day, where I was trying to do that, saving obviously a little bit of time for the research and stuff. If you're going to go out on a listing presentation, as an example, being prepared, being confident is probably 98%
Mm-hmm.
of that battle. You know, uh, it's funny, but a seller, an owner can kind of sniff if they kind of know a little bit about the business. They can kind of sniff you out if you're not experienced,
Yeah.
you know, and knowing the answers to questions, I think is critically important. I always joke with every agent I meet. I say, I didn't become successful because of my good looks. Became successful because I did my homework, you know, and that's part of it too. When we talk about what new agents should be doing to get into that mode, it's like when you have to prepare for everything that you're
Yeah.
going to do. You got to prepare even for a showing. You got to prepare for if you do it right. You want to know everything that you can, that you can about that house, right? So that when somebody asks you a question, you know the
Yeah.
answer. And if you don't know the answer, you're going to get them the answer real quickly. So whether it's a listing appointment, a showing, I mean, you name it, uh, I was prepared for it. And that was always key. And I know that my clients appreciated that. The other thing, because unfortunately a lot of agents don't do this, simple tip, answer your phone
Mm.
when it rings. A lot of agents don't answer their telephone. It used to frustrate me to kingdom come, and sometimes it still does. You know, answer your phone, be responsive, get back to people quick. It's a lot of realtors here in South Florida.
Yeah.
So, if you don't respond, they're going to go to
Somebody else
somebody
will.
else, and somebody else will. That's a big, big tip right
Gotcha.
there.
Well, I think that's a really good point you brought up in regards to the knowledge and just kind of knowing your stuff too, because it's like with anything else, you have a plumber coming to fix your pipes, and then you can kind of sense if they don't know what they're doing, you're probably not going to have as much confidence in that professional, and that's what they're supposed to be. You're paying them for that service.
Absolutely. I mean, I had an electrician one time come to my house to install a light, and I knew within 5 minutes I knew
Didn't know
more
what he
than
was
he
talking
did
about.
about installing that light.
Mm.
He was basically having me read the instructions to him, so he could figure it.
Yeah.
We try to figure it out. And at the end of the day, I kind of said, did I really need to pay that guy for
Yeah.
that?
For that.
And real estate's the same thing. Where people are entrusting us with probably their largest investment, either on the sale side or on the buy side. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's their biggest
Hmm.
investment. And I find it fascinating that sometimes they entrust that type of sale to somebody with either very little experience, or sometimes it's just a family relative,
Mm.
which is fine. But the family relative might just be a part timer that really doesn't do real estate and
Hmm.
really knows very little about the
About the
whole
market and
process,
everything.
the market, negotiations, the whole thing. And really, if you were looking at any other professional with that type of investment, I mean, how much research would you do on that professional, right? And the same thing really holds true in real estate. The good realtors really know their stuff.
That's great. That actually brings me up to another point. What do you think is the biggest misconception about the real estate industry as a whole? Um, because it's not something we're not brought up taught in school. You
Yeah.
know, how to buy a home, what mortgages, all these other stuff. So, what do you think is the biggest misconception about the industry, or something that you think that everyone should know about it that they
Well, the
don't?
biggest misconception about the industry as a whole is that real estate is an easy career and occupation.
Mm.
Um, it's not. It takes a lot of hard work, and again, the good realtors will tell you it's not necessarily even. It's not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday type job. It's a 7 day a week kind of job, and when you watch a lot of these reality shows, like my wife did, that where everybody's making $12 million on every single deal, and everybody's running
Yeah.
around happy, high fiving each other every day. Um, it's not an easy business. Real estate, I like to say residential real estate is an emotional purchase. It's an emotional transaction. Sometimes you just not only have to play with the facts and figures, but sometimes you're a part-time psychologist,
Hmm.
psychiatrist, with your clients, depending on the situation that's occurring. I've encountered all kinds of situations, whether it's, a death in the family that leads to an estate sale, divorce, loss of job, upsizing down, good events like, the birth of a child, which is causing somebody to want to
Yep.
upgrade, etc. So a lot of those things come into play when you're a real estate agent. And I think that, there's a common misconception that all real estate agents, all they do is kind of just show a house and draw a check.
Mm.
And it's really just, it's not that easy at all. There's a lot of different components that are involved in a sale, a lot of different pieces that a good agent needs to interact with, whether it's the buyer, the seller, the lender, uh, the title company slash or attorneys. In some cases, you're also interacting with the local government if there's permits, that need to be resolved or issues that need to be resolved depending on the municipality. So there's a lot of different things that come into play. And of course, following that along the whole track of the transaction, not just from the time that you put an offer in, but all the way through the time that you close on a property. Uh, that to me is probably the biggest obstacle. Well, when you say obstacle or misconception that
Mm-hmm.
most people have about the business of, of real estate, when it comes to being an agent. And I hope I answered that.
Perfect. To focus a little bit on the general public out there, buyers and sellers, with rates, and obviously in this day and age, everything going crazy with rates fluctuating. What is something you think you could say to calm the nerves of both buyers and sellers in this market that we have today?
Yeah. Well, let me start with this on the seller side. I mean, on the from the seller side, we had in the last year and a half to 2 years a very unusual market. It's not the normal market. What I mean by unusual, I mean I used to joke and say, hey, all you had to do was stick a for sale sign in front of the house, and the house had 12 offers, was under contract in 5 days, and and
Yep.
that was it. We're going back to a more normal market where houses are definitely staying on the market a little bit longer, uh, but the time that they're staying on the market is not an unusual amount of time. Uh, I remember during a normal market where if I sold a house within a 90-day period, within a 3-month period, I considered that
That's
pretty
really
good.
fast.
You know, and actually I used to brag about that. I sell 97% of my houses in 90 days or less. So we're kind of going back to that kind of market. The other thing that I think sellers, when we're talking about calming sellers down, it's really educating sellers, is to let them know that the prices in the market that was prevalent a year and a half ago, even a year ago, even a few months ago,
Mhm.
is not the same market that we're in now. Real estate is an ever-changing market, and it's kind of like a roller coaster. So when you have a seller say, "Well, so and so across the street sold their house for X," depending on when it sold, it could be relevant or it could be totally irrelevant
Mhm.
to today's market. Uh, I think that in South Florida in particular, we're blessed in that our real estate market is very strong for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it is location, frankly,
Mhm.
and environment. Uh, our housing prices in this market have not gone down. They haven't really dropped, you know, uh, tremendously. And I think that that's something that a seller can take some solace in, but also to be realistic in terms of what the market is now versus what it
Mhm.
may have been a year and a half ago. On the buyer side, yes, interest rates have gone up, but we kind of have a saying, but most buyers are not competing with 9 other offers on every house that they're putting an offer on.
True.
So you have a lot more one-on-one type of negotiation going on, which is good for a buyer because it gives them more leverage. I'm starting to actually see some more buyers approach sellers with offers that contain seller contributions back to the buyer's closing costs and other costs. So I didn't see that in the last couple of years at all,
Gotcha.
So I'm starting to see that a little bit. And then there's, really the old framework that a lot of us, adhere to, and that is, you know, marry the house,
Date the
you
rate.
kind of date the rate,
Mhm.
because the rates, when they become more favorable to you, you can always refinance. And generally, depending on how many points it goes down or whatever, it's favorable to refinance, and so that's if you really love the house, that's that's the way to go. On both sides of the equation, I'm telling every agent in this office, motivation is really key. What's your motivation
Mhm.
for selling, and what's your motivation for buying? If you're a seller, there's good motivations for selling. If you're just thinking right now in this market that you should just put a house out there to see what's the best, what it's going to go for, and you put out some ridiculously high price, it's just going to sit, you know. And if you're a buyer and you put a ridiculously low ball
Mhm.
offer, you're going to get the same kind of reaction. You're not going to get a favorable response from most of the sellers because they're still, again, this market is a little different than many other parts of the country, and our housing prices are still relatively stable.
Gotcha. Well, a little bit more lighthearted. What would you say is either the best or worst thing about your job in the industry, or maybe your favorite or least favorite thing that you've in your
As a
experience?
broker or as an agent?
Well, I guess you could go
Because
either.
there's different,
That's true.
Well, okay. I mean, it's simple. As a broker, the the worst thing from being with being a broker as opposed to being an agent is when I was an agent, I was my own show. I was
Mm,
responsible for myself. Now I'm responsible for just under 300 agents,
it's crazy.
and so it's a lot of responsibility.
Everybody
They all
calling
have
you with their
different
problems.
issues, a lot of problems. Yeah, and things like that. And so obviously that's very different. I mean, on the upside, the pleasure that I get from seeing this office being one of the top offices in the entire United States is certainly wow, it makes me feel fantastic. Uh, and obviously that's really as a result of my agents. I'd like to think that some of that comes from Coldwell Banker in this office,
Hmm.
in terms of again the support, the value that we provide for our agents. I have over 49 agents that won national awards in this office this past year. I have over 30 agents that have been with this office 25 years or more,
Wow,
which is pretty impressive
it's a testament.
considering that, agents can really go wherever they
Hmm.
want if they feel that, that we're not serving them properly. So that's probably on the best, the best side. Being an agent, the best thing, it's kind of an oxymoron. Being an agent, the independence is wonderful. The more successful you'll get, you'll find that you have to uh, manipulate that independence, if you will, or your time management. I think
Mm,
is the hardest thing. I remember a former broker of mine saying, "Mario, when you get to be successful," and I don't know how she knew this. Maybe she had a crystal ball. I don't know. I was pretty new then. She said, "When you get to be successful, the hardest thing that you're going to have to figure out is how to manage your time." And that's absolutely true. So time management is really, really important. And I remembered that, and I practice it even to this day. In terms of how much time I spend doing all the major functions
hmm.
that I'm supposed to do. So that's probably you know the best and the worst.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, who would you say is your most, and I hate to boil it down to one, these are always so tough, but who would you say is probably one of your most influential people, whether it was in your personal life or business, that, that you can look back on?
Yeah, I mean, I have, I actually had a couple of college professors that were instrumental in terms of uh, teaching me the concept of succeeding, even when I thought I was going to fail. There were a couple of agents in this office, one that unfortunately is now deceased, who were very instrumental when I was starting off in my career. They were uh, seasoned agents that would, again, never hesitated to give me advice when I was, sitting there, and I'd go, "Hey, Jeffrey, what do you think of this?" And he'd say, "Oh, you should do this or don't do that or whatever." And those are things that I'll never forget because they were totally, you know, they weren't, they were selfless. They didn't hesitate in terms of
Gotcha.
helping me, and it really helped me to appreciate that you don't need to be selfish in this business. I know that there are agents in this business that like to keep everything close to the vest and they don't
Hmm.
want to reveal their so-called secrets. But there's a lot of good agents that are more than willing to mentor and help, you know, uh, junior agents to really to become good in this business. Because at the end of the day, I'll tell you one thing I loved about being an agent. I loved working with good agents. The worst thing you want to do when
Mm,
you're an agent is work with a bad agent because who does most of the work? You do,
that, yeah.
right? So if I worked with a good agent, man, that was like a blessing. I was so happy, and 99% of the time the transactions were great because both parties work towards the same end. And I like to tell agents that too. Sometimes agents get very adversarial about this process. The buyer sellers agents are like knocking horns. And what agents need to remember, I think every agent should remember, is we're in it for the same goal. We want to accomplish a sale. We want to get this transaction done. We want to do the best we can for our clients, and that's where the negotiation side of that comes in. Sometimes I tell people when you're in a transaction and both sides feel like they haven't won and maybe they feel like they haven't lost,
Hmm.
we're somewhere in the middle. Both sides have really won
Yeah.
because they've come to some kind of a conclusion. You know.
Gotcha. That's a really great point that you just made. Um, Obviously, you have over 300 agents, so your time is money. I see. So, last question for you: if you weren't doing, what you are today and being in real estate, and even before being a real estate agent, what do you think you'd be doing with your life?
Well, that's funny. I mean, I guess my short answer
I
would
know
be,
you're a foodie, so
well, I'm a
it
foodie and I'd be
might have.
golfing.
Gotcha.
I joke about that. I'd probably be doing some type of counseling work again, or some kind of volunteer work. I mentioned that I'm a member of a not-for-profit.
Hmm.
This not-for-profit that I'm actually a board member of assists individuals that are with new business startups.
Gotcha.
And so we help them with, understanding the financing side of a business, the whole, operations, budgeting, all of the things that a lot of individuals just aren't. You mentioned a lot of people in their upbringing, they're really not brought up
Hmm.
to understand how a lot of these processes work. And that holds true of really a lot of business in general. So I think I would probably be some kind of a counselor, whether I'd get paid or not,
Gotcha.
and to help people succeed. Because again, it always makes me happy when I see somebody succeed, whether it's, in one transaction or, as a result of their career, going up. Uh, it really has always lent me to a lot of self-satisfaction, and I'll continue to do that even after I get out of real estate.
Awesome. And what's the name of the nonprofit?
It's called Partners for Youth.
Partners for Youth. Awesome. Well, Mario, can't thank you enough for your time. Appreciate being here and being a part of this office and brokerage. So, anything you want to sign off with as far as any shameless plugs, plugging the nonprofit
Well,
or
the shameless plug is
the
simple.
office?
I mean, I think Coldwell Banker Realty, particularly Coldwell Banker Pinecrest, is a fantastic place to affiliate if you're thinking of getting into a real estate career. Again, I think that the training and support that Coldwell Banker Realty provides to realtors, not only new realtors but on an ongoing basis, is unsurpassed. And I encourage agents to check out other brokerages. And I can't tell you time and time again, agents that have even chosen another brokerage over this one come back. They call me 6 months later and they say, "Hey, I want to come back, or I want to go to Coldwell Banker Realty," and and they come back. And so that's again a testament to the model that we have here, which I believe breeds success.
Gotcha. Well, again, Mario, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Marley. Thank you very much.
All right. That's the real South Florida. Thanks for watching till the end of the video. If you got some value from it, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone else. And if you want me to help your real estate dreams come true, be sure to contact me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.